Imagine you were born 3,000 years ago, and the world reaches you differently. Maybe you never see it. Maybe it's always silent. Maybe your legs never carry you across it. No diagnosis, no specialist, no ramp, no sign, no accessible anything. Just you and a world very obviously not built with you in mind. So, what happens to you? You'd assume the worst. History says otherwise. Because the story you've been told that disabled people were left at the edges of history has it backwards. They were never at the edges. Half the time, they were holding the whole thing together. And some of them, we know their names. This is the history class you never got.
Most people pictured disabled people in the ancient world as helpless, abandoned, hidden away or left to a doctor who was basically a man named Greg with a rock. The evidence says the opposite. Some of them became legends. So let's start with blindness. Legend says the greatest poet who ever lived, Homer, was completely blind. But forget legend, let's name someone real. Didymus. Born in Alexandria 1,700 years ago, he lost his sight at 4 years old. In a world that assumed a blind child had no future, Didymus became one of the sharpest scholars of his entire age. And when he couldn't read the books everyone else could, he didn't quit. He carved letters into wood and read them with his fingertips. He invented reading by touch, roughly 14 centuries before a Frenchman named Braille got his name on the idea. Didymus would like a word. Now, deafness. The ancient experts really fumbled this one. Aristotle, allegedly a genius, decided that since reason lived in speech, anyone who couldn't hear couldn't think. So, meet the man who proved him wrong, Quintus Pedius, and the very first deaf person in all of recorded history whose name we actually know. The adults around him had a choice: write him off or hand him a paintbrush. They handed him the brush, and he became a painter so gifted that Pliny the Elder recorded his talent for us 2,000 years later. The boy they said couldn't reason is remembered for his art. And what about those who couldn't speak at all? The ancient world had a nasty habit of mistaking silence for emptiness, assuming that if you couldn't talk, nothing was going on inside. Wrong every time. Non-verbal people did what humans always do. They found another way. A gesture, a sign, a mark pressed into clay. Because language was never about the mouth, it was about the mind behind it. And that was always there. Then there's getting around, in a world made of rocks, mud, and stairs. You know King Tut. Golden Mask, Boy King. Here's what the gift shop leaves out. He had a clubfoot. He walked with a cane. Archaeologists found over 130 walking sticks in his tomb. The most legendary pharaoh in history got around with a mobility aid and ran an empire while doing it. But the best plot twist belongs to Claudius, born into the Roman imperial family with a limp, a stammer, a tremor. His own family was so embarrassed they hid him away and agreed he was a fool. And here's the thing about being underestimated. It is astonishingly safe. While every ambitious relative was getting assassinated, nobody bothered to murder the man they thought was useless. So Claudius survived. And in 41 AD, the family embarrassment became emperor of Rome. He conquered Britain. He reformed the empire. The man they wrote off as worthless ran the entire known world. Awkward for the family. And when the body needed backup, humans engineered it. The Cairo toe, a working prosthetic big toe built 3,000 years ago and actually worn. The Romans built legs out of bronze. People were hacking the human body before doctor was even a real job. But here's the part that should genuinely stop you. The ancient world was brutal. If disability truly made someone useless, survival logic says they'd be left behind. The bones say the opposite. Shanidar I, a Neanderthal man, 45,000 years ago, blind in one eye, likely deaf, a withered, possibly amputated arm, a ruined leg. He should not have survived a single season. He lived to old age, which is impossible alone. Someone fed him, protected him, walked at his pace for years. A young man we call Romito II lived to adulthood with dwarfism because his people made sure he did. And they weren't unusual. Across the ancient world, men, women, and children kept alive by people who simply refused to let them go. Archaeologists call it the bioarchaeology of care. The plain version? Looking after each other is one of the oldest things we've ever done. So everything you assumed, that accessibility is new, that inclusion is modern, that disabled people sat at the back of human history, is wrong. They wrote the poems, they painted the art, they ruled the empires, they invented reading itself. And when they needed it, they were carried, not out of pity, but because they belonged. Disability never put anyone outside the human story. Half the time, it put them right at the center of it. They were never disabled by their bodies, only by a world that wasn't built for them yet. So, that life you imagined at the very start, born 3,000 years ago into a world that wasn't built for you, you assumed the worst, and history proved you wrong. You wouldn't have been cast out. You'd have been a bard, a painter, an emperor, or simply someone whose people refused to leave them behind. Whatever you're navigating right now, you're standing in a line that runs back 45,000 years. The world has always adapted. People have always carried each other. And you have always belonged.
If this made you feel seen, you always have been. Subscribe.